All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Patrice Barley, and I am the Assistant Director of Admissions and Coordinator of Diversity Recruitment at Duke Law. And we are located in Durham, North Carolina. We are a smaller law school. We try to have about 220 students in each of our class. But it's we're right on the main campus for Duke University, so we're kind of in the thick of everything that's going on at the university. So you definitely get connection to the university community, and I think probably some of the other things are pretty similar to some of the other law schools that you'll hear about today. But you know, we have kind of the standard law school curriculum that any of our other peer institutions will have. We have a pretty robust clinical program, and I'm happy to answer any questions about that, and externships, pro bono opportunities, so all of those kind of standard opportunities. So if you have specific questions about Duke, I'm happy to answer any of those. But yeah, I will stop there and turn it over to my colleagues.
Thank you, Patrice. And next I see Mary Ann.
So hi, everyone. I am Mary Ann Clifford. I'm the Assistant Dean of Admissions here at Washington University's Law School. So because this is a WashU event, of course, I'm certain that you know where we're located. But of course, for our own undergraduate students, this last year, just like it has been for the law school, has been very different. You maybe haven't made your way over to the law school building. But for those of you who maybe are not aware, we're kind of at the western end of campus near the near Siegel Hall. So, but it's the law school is it's here. It's a resource. We do draw students from all over the country. We are lucky enough to have a number of WashU undergrads go on to matriculate here at the law school. It's an academically rigorous school, and with lots of opportunities to get practical skills experience, or what we call experiential learning opportunities. And as I mentioned, because we draw students from all over the country, our students go all over the country. We are a little different in that respect than most law schools. There is no one market where the vast majority of our students go. So if you're looking for a school that could, you know, give you this really great education, but also get you where you want to go, wherever that may be, you know, WashU can be a really good choice. Academically, again, the credentials of our incoming class are very, very strong. We always interview candidates, and of course, we always interview our WashU alums or undergraduate students. And so I would encourage you to at least talk with us and find out more about WashU's law school, and you kind of pick our brains to give you any other sort of advice we can about the whole process. Again, being located here in St. Louis is really a benefit. We're a good sized city, as you know, but we're not so big that it's hard to get around. One of the reasons we have such a robust clinical education program is because there are so many wonderful opportunities here for our students while they're students at WashU. Of course, we have a U.S. Attorney's Office here in St. Louis, but we also have one across the river in the Southern District of Illinois where students have placements. Same thing with the federal courts. Lots of offices, state and local government offices. Of course, WashU, or rather St. Louis, it's like every big city. I mean, there's a lot of work, legal work to be done here, and a lot in serving the community. So our students do become very, very active in doing public service while they're here in law school. Let's see, what else can I tell you? Oh, and maybe a unique feature though, is that I've already related that students come from all over, go all over when they graduate. Well, they also have those opportunities while they're in law school. We have a congressional administrative agency clinic in Washington, D.C., but we also have externships in New York, and really what we call a semester in practice externship can be a full-time externship for a semester in any city throughout the country. We do put a lot of emphasis on judicial clerkships for students. And so our career services office starts working with all of our incoming students really in the summer before they begin. We want to make sure you're educated about what a judicial clerkship is, and also all the other opportunities in the legal profession. They'll start working with you on resume and networking and planning, kind of getting a strategy together. The nice thing about your 1L year is the courses are set for you. And so you don't have to make a lot of choices at that point, but we want you to be prepared to hit the ground running for not only your academics in law school, but also, what you're going to be doing in your summers and then of course at graduation.
Thank you, Mary Ann. And then our third panelist is Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone. I am Elizabeth Carney, Senior Associate Director of Admissions at UChicago Law. I've got the beautiful law school behind me. We are, like I said, University of Chicago. So we are located in the city of Chicago in the Hyde Park neighborhood. It's kind of the best of both worlds. Hyde Park, the campus, the rest of the University of Chicago is there. So Booth School of Business, Harris School of Public Policy, Crown School of Social Work, the undergrad, all of those resources of this big research institution are at your disposal on this really beautiful tree-lined campus, but then you're also 2 steps away from the rest of the resources of the city of Chicago. So really great location-wise for both access to resources, but also access to kind of what Dean Clifford was talking about, the access to the rest of the city and the clinical opportunities and the pro bono opportunities that you get from being in a city like Chicago. We are also a smaller law school, so our incoming class is between 185 and 195. We really like that small class size because it really gives you unprecedented access to our faculty. And our faculty, I think one highlight of UChicago is that our faculty are as invested in the teaching as they are in the scholarship. So they're the types of professors that are vying to teach you in their 1L classes, taking you out for coffee or Zoom coffee during this virtual time. So really a lot of access to professors at UChicago Law. And then I think a couple other highlights about UChicago Law that I think of when I think of the school are a real interdisciplinary approach. Students very commonly take classes outside of the law school that count towards their law degree. We have a lot of cross-listed classes, and we're on the quarter system, which means you can actually take more courses under the quarter system than a semester system. So we've got really exploring a lot. And then I think the last thing I think of is kind of this dual commitment. One, you'll hear a lot at UChicago Law about the life of the mind and ideas. And that is like, if you are the type of person that likes school and likes digging into questions and isn't just satisfied with, the law is this, but wants to really dig into it and ask why should it be that way? What's the historical context behind it? What's the economics behind it? What's the philosophy behind it? UChicago is the place that the students really enjoy having those conversations. And then the other dual mode is then kind of putting that into action. Majority of our students are involved in clinical opportunities. And this year, our third year students served the most pro bono hours over their 3 years than any class before. So about 200 students in that third year performed over 14,000 hours of pro bono service. So they really do kind of balance that theory and practice well.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And so I really do want to keep this informal. I have some questions for our panelists, but please also feel free to put questions in the chat. You can send them to everyone so everyone can see, or you can just address them to me and I'll read them out either way. But my first question for our panel, we can start with Mary Ann. Yesterday, we talked about the components of a successful law school application in the session that we had. And I think one thing students often have a lot of questions about is what are law schools looking for in a personal statement? So can you start that discussion for us?
Yeah, sure. So So the personal statement, I just remember when I was applying to go to law school, and I always found that to be the most challenging part of the application. So it's what can I write that is going to, make the difference in terms of, okay, the academic credentials, they are what they are, but what can I put in that personal statement? And we do look at that very closely. Really, again, it is what it is. It's a personal statement. So it can be almost about any topic, at least at Washington University. Of course, we want you to tell us something about yourself. If you were talking with someone and you wanted them to know something about you, or if you didn't have the opportunity to talk with someone directly, and this was the only way they were going to get to know you, what kind of story could you tell? What kind of would you write about some experience you've had? How would this be presented to the reader as a way for them, as I say, to get to know you? It should, of course, be well written. And I think I should back up a little bit, because some schools do offer prompts, or they have specific essays that they want you to complete. Here at WashU, we just ask for a personal statement. And again, it can be on any topic, but I caution candidates when I say that, because again, we want to get some information about you, something that we're not going to get from another part of your application. So I've seen a wide range of applications and personal statements, everything from someone who's just kind of reiterated what they've done and what that's kind of following along with their resume. And I would say probably that's my least favorite, or that's probably not going to tell me anything new, but others will tell a story about themselves. Maybe one cautionary tale I would say is make sure it is about you and your experience or your interaction with others, because we all have people we admire in our lives, parents and grandparents. And so sometimes I'll read personal statements that will be about someone's grandfather or grandmother. And that's not as helpful, but it's good just to come up, kind of brainstorm on some ideas, and again, as you read it over, or as you have someone else read it over, if they say, "Oh wow, I didn't know that about you," that is a good personal statement. Of course, remember your audience. Who's the audience? It's the readers of your application file. That could be faculty members, it could be admissions administrators. You want to remember why you're writing this. It's to get into the law school of your choice. And so you do want to craft it. And again, as I say, craft it carefully and remember your audience and who it's for and what the purpose of this essay is for. Oops, Nicole, I think you're muted.
I am mute. I tried to unmute. Elizabeth, anything to add, or any tips you have for personal statements?
Maybe a couple little things to partly reiterate and partly add. Similar to kind of what Dean Clifford was saying, when people ask me about how to approach a personal statement, UChicago Laws is also open-ended. We ask for a personal statement that's, there's no page limit, but we say, roughly between 2 and 4 pages is typically a good length that we see. And then we ask you, please don't restate your resume. We want to learn something new about you. So that's kind of in the prompt as well. And so to start kind of going through this brainstorming process of what do I want to tell the admissions committee, I usually tell applicants, think about if you had 5 to 10 minutes to come to my office and sit down with me and tell me something about yourself, and you only had that 5-10 minutes, what would you really want to tell me? Like, what is important for you to tell me in those 5 to 10 minutes? And I think that kind of will get to the heart of what might be a good thing to write about in a personal statement. And then the only thing I wanted to add is, how does this fit with why UChicago, or why X school that you're applying to? Do I put that in my personal statement? Is that expected in my personal statement? At UChicago, we There's not an expectation that YU Chicago is in your personal statement, but if it fits in your personal statement, you can include it. But there's no like points. Like I'm not saying like, oh, extra 5 points for Elizabeth because she mentioned YU Chicago law. There's nothing like that. But if you feel strongly about including it, we're happy to hear why you're so interested in U Chicago law. We also have an opportunity to submit an addendum with the application. So if your personal statement, if that story doesn't lend itself to also including YU Chicago, but you're a big law and economics person, or you really love Martha Nussbaum and you want to tell us that, you can always submit a YU Chicago statement as well. So you've got a little bit of flexibility. The only time that I think it's more helpful to tell us YU Chicago is, or maybe why law school, like some people say, do I need to tell you why law school? Generally, I say no. If you do decide to take 5 years, 6 years, 7 years in a totally different field, I don't know, let's say you're a chemist for 5, 6, 7 years, 10 years, and now you're coming to law school. Sometimes when you're making like a big shift like that for a certain number of years, then I think it's helpful to tell us why law. But if you're coming straight through, if you're coming a year, 2 later, I'm not as worried about why law school. I know you've kind of really thought about it, but I'm usually a little more curious when there's that bigger span of time between, you know, a real change in careers.
And Patrice, anything to add? Any tips that you have about personal statements?
I'm sure I'll add a couple things here. As my colleagues kind of aforementioned, I definitely agree that you should not just kind of rehash what's in on your resume or in your transcript. You know, I did these legal internships, I took these legal related courses, but it is okay to maybe choose one of those experiences and talk about it and talk about how it impacted you. So elaborate on that a little bit, but we don't need kind of a relisting of what we can already see on your resume or from reading your transcript. And from the perspective of Duke in particular, we do not interview as part of our admissions process. So the personal statement is extremely important to us because it is the only place in the application where we are able to hear directly from you before we are making an admissions decision. So I think you want to be a little bit thoughtful about which schools you're applying to, which ones may interview, which ones may not. That might influence a little bit more as to how you use the personal statement. But because we do not, that is the one place that you have where you can basically speak to us directly. And so we're looking really closely at that piece because of that. The other thing I will say is that it's also really important for us to be able to evaluate the quality of your writing. So writing is going to be really important, obviously in the law school application, but once you get into law school and your legal career. And so being able to have a sense of what kind of foundation you have in writing is going to be really important in through assessing the personal statement. And so you definitely want to make sure that you're putting the time into making sure that there's no errors, there's no grammar mistakes, all of that type of stuff is going to be really important when you are thinking about writing. And I always recommend writing and revising and, you know, maybe setting it aside and coming back to it and really making sure that it represents you well, both in terms of you telling your story, but also in terms of it being error-free, there not being any mistakes in your personal statement.
They're all really great points. Another question students often ask is about diversity statements. Elizabeth, I don't know, does the University of Chicago have an option to write a diversity statement? And do you have thoughts about, you know, when a student should write one? What are you looking for if I assume, is it an optional diversity statement? And what's your advice for students deciding whether or not to write a diversity statement?
Sure. So our addenda section is pretty, you know, you can submit an addenda for anything. I think we say in the addenda, the most common addenda we receive are diversity statements, set like test score addendum. So I think we do use those as like the top 3 most common. But it is the type of thing where there's 2 spaces for an addenda, and whatever reason you need to write an addenda. And then YU Chicago is probably like the 3rd most common. But in terms of when to write a diversity statement, part of it comes back to your personal statement. What's your personal statement about? Sometimes your personal statement, it includes a lot about your background. And so sometimes the personal statement, once you get through it, you're at the end of it and you're like, okay, this is what I want to tell the committee. Sometimes, depending on what your personal statement is about, you go through your personal statement and you're like, okay, this is great. This is something I wanted to tell committee, but there's something about me or my background that I feel like is not totally represented in my personal statement, but is really important to who I am as a person that I need to get across to the admissions committee. And so I think if you finish your personal statement and you feel like there's something about you that you're not getting across about, like I said, you or your background, and diversity of all different kinds. If you feel like that is missing, then I would say that is the time when you write a diversity statement. Again, there's no point system. Like if someone writes a diversity statement, I'm not giving them an extra 5 points. It's not something that's expected. It's more, what do you feel like you need to tell the committee? And if you feel like it's missing from your personal statement, you have the opportunity to write that addenda.
Patrice, anything to add on? Does Duke have an optional diversity statement that students can complete?
Yes. Yeah, so we do offer 2 optional statements. So one focused on why you're interested in Duke in particular, and then the second one would be focused on diversity. They are truly optional, so you don't have to write either one. And kind of as Elizabeth said earlier, you can definitely write your personal statement focused on diversity. And so if you do that, there is no need to write a second essay about that if you sufficiently cover that in your personal statement. But you can feel free to use your personal statement to focus on something else and then write that separate diversity statement. I will say though, if you do decide to write the diversity statement or any of the other optional essays, you definitely want to put as much time into writing either of those optional essays or both of them as you did your personal statement. So you want to make sure that either or both of your optional essays are as consistently strong as your personal statement. So you don't want to have a beautifully polished personal statement and then your optional essays be really not well written. So if you're going to write them, you want to put as much time and effort into writing and revising and making sure they're error-free the same way that you did your personal statement as well.
Marianne, does WashU have optional essays? And often students wonder, well, if I don't fill out this optional essay, is that a strike against me? Is it really optional? Is it a trick? Is it a test?
Yeah. So of course, we welcome as much information as possible from the candidate. That doesn't mean we want to see someone's honor thesis from their senior year, but if they would like to provide extra statements about diversity or why WashU, or sometimes this is getting onto a different subject. Sometimes there are explanations about other parts of their application. We really welcome that, but it's certainly never held against someone for not submitting one of those addendum, one of the extra statements. Diversity can be so many different things. And I know all of our schools know the value of a diverse class, of diverse perspectives coming to that class. And so really the 2 things we're looking for as we put together a class of naturally academic credentials. Will this person be successful in our law school? Do they have what it takes to be a great lawyer or really a fine ethical lawyer? And how are they going to fit into our class and what are they going to bring to the class? And of course, we're really looking for diversity in so many different ways. And so that's the one thing I would say about the diversity statement. Sometimes individuals think, oh, well, I don't think I check these boxes. But, again, you could be a first generation student, and that is a diverse perspective. You could have grown up in a small town or on a farm, and maybe that's a diverse perspective. Maybe your political leanings are, at one way or the other, or straight down the middle. those are all perspectives. And so the diversity statement can be, again, I encourage students to think about, what are they bringing to the class? What diverse perspective are they bringing? And, and if they feel really comfortable about writing about it and think it will add to their application, then I encourage them to submit a statement, but it's never considered, it's never a detriment, or it's never like points off and for someone not to write one. Here at WashU, we do have the advantage that we do interview. We interview personally, so it's one-on-one with an admissions counselor here at the law school. So we do try to get to know our students as well as possible. So sometimes we'll glean information from those interviews as well.
Great. So Patrice, Marianne and Elizabeth have talked a little bit about other addenda to the application, what students might want to explain. And so can you talk a little bit about what might need an explanation in an application in terms of maybe a grade, a GPA increase, a GPA decrease, an LSAT increase or decrease? Is there anything that Duke is looking for students to explain on an application?
Yeah, sure. So I typically recommend that if there's anything in your application that you feel may be questionable, that maybe just reading the application on its face, it's not really clear what happened there. I think that's something that you want to use the space in the addenda to explain. So, but the rule of thumb is that your addenda, you want your addenda to be short. So it should not take the form of a new essay, but a couple sentences, maybe a paragraph just to explain that. If you had a bad grade one semester, giving us an explanation of the circumstances surrounding that might be helpful. If you've had maybe a dip in LSAT score, something along those lines, anything like that is helpful for us to just have as much context as possible so that we are able to make the best decision on your application as a whole, and put everything into proper context. So if there's anything that you feel like might be questionable, I think it's best to go ahead and address it than to leave it unaddressed and leave us to assume or pretty much make up what may have happened there.
Marianne, often we have students, I'm sure you see this, where students start out perhaps pre-med taking a lot of science courses, and that's weighed their GPA down a little bit, but once they've transitioned into another academic interest, their GPA rises. Is that something that needs an explanation? Is that something that an admissions committee just sees, or how do you suggest students handle that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I hate to say it is a pretty common occurrence. And it's interesting to see where someone can, start out freshman year for whatever reason, pre-med or engineering or what have you, and find that it was just not that. Once they got into it, they realized this is not for me. And then when they make that turn to another major, another subject area, they really bloom and do really well. And so, I wouldn't say that requires an explanation just because it is, it happens pretty often, but we do receive, and, it's helpful to have that explanation from a candidate. I think, again, I kind of fall on the side of, and as Patrice said, really, we're not looking for paragraphs about this, but any explanation, any couple of sentences, if you'd like to add them. But that's when I will say the committee usually recognizes. The instance that's more puzzling is the one where a student's just done beautifully, and then one semester had really, poor grades, or there was a gap in their education and they don't address what they were doing during that gap. Maybe they withdrew from school for a medical reason or what have you. And so that's when the committee says no explanation for low grades, second spring semester, sophomore year, something like that. And it's, again, everything's taken in context. So I can't say that that's an automatic, like, oh, okay, we'll set that file aside. In fact, what we do is sometimes we will write to the candidate and ask, would they like to give some sort of explanation for something the committee has asked about.
Elizabeth, anything to add to that?
I don't think so. I'll just reiterate for these kind of addenda, short, sweet, fact-based, because I do think it is helpful to have the context, but it's not another essay when we're reading, thousands and thousands of applications. It's helpful to kind of get that context, but in a way that we can kind of digest it in a couple of sentences. And I really appreciate when I get the context on whether it's a transcript or if you've got an 8-point jump in your LSAT score, like that's not like a standard deviation difference between scores. So if it can be as simple as like, I just wasn't as prepared for the first one, I would encourage you to prepare for your tests. But if it does happen, there's all different sorts of circumstances where you might not have been ready the first time, or you were sick one of the times. It's so easy to just write a sentence or two about it. And then we don't have to wonder what happened.
Mary Ann, can you tell us a little bit about how early decision works at WashU?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have, I don't know, I haven't looked at all schools, but I think we have one of the most flexible early decision programs out there. So basically what it is the early decision, once a candidate has applied, we don't actually have any firm deadline for when you need to apply early decision. We'll take early decision applicants really up probably through February, maybe even into March. What early decision is really telling us is that WashU is your number one choice for law school. So again, that's good information for the admissions committee to have as they're looking at files. Once you have submitted your application, and once we have all of the supporting documents, your CAS report, which is a report that comes to us from LSAC, your statements, as long as we have everything, the committee will review that. If they would like to, proceed, they will invite you to interview. And once your interview is complete, then you will receive a decision on your early decision application within 2 weeks. So again, it's not so much about, oh, I have to have it in by the 1st of November as, okay, I've really thought about this. This is the school where I want to be. That's what early decision is really telling us. What we also do on the back end, if you are admitted under our early decision program, you will also hear from our scholarship committee, and they will let you know, what your scholarship will be so that you can make an informed decision. We do then give you, once you have your admit offer and scholarship, we do give you about 48 hours to decide. Yes, I want to come. Great, binding. Put down your deposit. It's all set. You're going to be in our class in whatever the upcoming cycle is. But some candidates, really after they see, okay, I've been admitted to WashU, but oh my gosh, I'm not sure I can come with X scholarship and then they decide, what, this isn't really the best choice for me. And we're fine with that. We say, okay, we'll hold your admission, or you will still continue to be admitted, but your scholarship under early decision will go away. And then you will be considered under our regular scholarship process. The scholarship we give under early decision, we make it the best scholarship you would ever receive from Washington University. So it's not a matter of, oh, I'm going to get more if I wait later. No, that's not the case. We really try to do our very best for our early decision candidates.
Thank you. Elizabeth, I know, early decision in the law school process, it's different at every school. It's not as standardized as it is for students when they're applying to college. Does University of Chicago have any sort of early decision option or a way for students to indicate that University of Chicago is their first choice school?
We do. We do have an early decision option. It is different from WashU's. Ours is, if you'd like to be considered for early decision, all of your application and materials must be in by December 1st. And then we will get a decision to you by the end, an admissions decision by the end of December. So within that month, we'll get back to you. And at that point, you can be admitted. And if you're admitted, it's binding early decision. You can be put on the wait list, which then means you're put into the regular decision pool. So there's times where we might waitlist someone at the early decision stage, but then later in the cycle, we'll admit them. At that point, it's no longer binding. So you can, if you get admitted at that point, you can kind of weigh your options, or you can get denied at that point. And then we do have people that will reapply, but you have to wait till the next admission cycle or beyond to apply again. So it is important to know that UChicago Law is your number one choice, because if you are admitted, it's binding. And then the other thing that's important to know about scholarships and financial aid is our process for admissions generally is that scholarships and financial aid are considered after admission. So it's a separate email with that information. So for early decision candidates, you have to know and be comfortable with the possibility that if I get 0 scholarship, 0 financial aid, is UChicago Law still my first choice? That doesn't mean that's what's going to happen, but you have to feel comfortable with that because it's a possibility. So really think about, like, do you want to be able to weigh all of the schools you get into with all of the scholarship offers? If that is the case, then I would say apply regular decision to UChicago Law. But if you say, no matter what happens, UChicago Law is my number one choice, we have like a very wide variety of outside scholarships, some specific scholarships that students can apply to. And so you say, even if I get 0, I know I'm going to do A, B, and C, and I'm going to make it work, then early decision might be a good option for you. But I definitely think you really got to think about that before you choose early decision versus regular decision.
And Patrice, what is Duke's early decision option?
Sure. So I wish our early decision was as generous as St. Clifford's, but unfortunately, it's not quite that way. We have 2 rounds of early decision. We have one that has a deadline in early November. And so people that apply within that deadline will hear back by the end of that calendar year. So by December 31 in that particular calendar year. And then our second round, the deadline is early January, and if you apply during that cycle, you will hear by the end of January that particular calendar year. And so in terms of the financial aid process, it's very similar to what Elizabeth described, in the sense that you will have to make a commitment to come to Duke, and it will be binding without knowing what your financial aid will look like. Our financial aid process it actually comes later as well. So in that sense, I don't think that early decision is for everybody, or even most people, and definitely anyone who does have financial concerns, I typically don't recommend applying early decision. We personally don't get a ton of early decision applications, and most people who are considering early decision want to do so because they want to demonstrate interest in Duke. And I think there's other ways that you can do that in a regular decision application without taking the risk of kind of this binding blind in terms of financial purposes commitment to Duke. So that's typically what I recommend if that is your reason for applying early decision. But kind of like Elizabeth said, if you know that Duke is your number one no matter what happens, then maybe early decision is for you. But I definitely don't think it's for most people at Duke, at least. So.
Okay, great, thank you, Elizabeth. Often students ask if they're taking time off between college before applying to law school, not taking time off, but doing something else before deciding to apply to law school. What kind of experience do law schools want to see that students have? And is gaining some sort of legal experience important?
From an admissions standpoint, we like to see all different kinds of experiences. It's really important to our class and the perspectives people are bringing, that they aren't all the same major and that they didn't have all of the same work experience before coming to law school. Certainly work experience in the law is not necessary. When applicants ask me or prospective students ask me about legal work experience, I think it's more a question for the applicant and the prospective student. Is it important for them to know what being in a law firm is like, or know what being in a nonprofit legal agency is like, or know what government work is like? Is that important for them in their decision to go to law school? And if that's the case, great, then, you know, pursue that type of legal work. But if you've always been interested in, it could be anything, business, and you, part of the reason you think you want to go to law school is because you want to combine business and the law, then having that business context coming into law is going to be a huge asset to you. So whatever that law and fill in the blank field is, having that fill in the blank field is going to bring real live practical experience, different kinds of context into the law, and it's going to help you in a way that having specific law experience might be a little bit different.
Great. Patrice, anything to add to that? Things that you're looking for students who've done something different between college before applying to law school?
I mean, I think it's pretty similar, the way that we approach it, the way kind of the way that Elizabeth explained. I think overall, when we look at your application in context, I think your story should make sense. So for instance, if you were an engineering major and then you worked in an engineering firm after graduating from college, you know, I think that makes sense. That you majored in engineering and you took a job in the engineering field post-graduation, and maybe now you're planning to pivot to law. And so maybe that's something you will address in your personal statement. But the fact that you haven't had any legal experience prior to coming is definitely, it's not a red flag or anything like that. Like Elizabeth said, I think it is more a question for the applicant if that's something that you feel like you need to either solidify your interest in the law or to determine what type of law maybe you might be interested in practicing, maybe help to narrow that down prior to coming to law school. Then I think it's great for the applicant, but I definitely wouldn't say it's something that we are kind of absolutely looking for when we are reviewing applications or reviewing resumes.
And Marianne, anything to add? And is it an advantage to take some time off or do something different between college and law school?
Well, we always think if you have any question about going to law school right out of undergrad, if you think you might like to take some time off, take it off. Law school will still be here a year or two or whenever down the road. We do think we appreciate individuals who have had work experience before coming to law school. The majority of our students have taken off at least a year or two. And again, as my colleagues have said, you know, it could be in different things. Some are doing AmeriCorps, Peace Corps, Teach for America, you know, and really, honestly, almost any experience after undergraduate school can be valuable. If you talk to anyone who's gone into the work world, they will tell you that, gosh, I learned so much the first 6 months on the job, just being out there. It really is a great experience. You know, it's great to have that experience. Now, having said that, we leave it up to the candidate to decide when going to law school is right for them. If they have, you know, done their due diligence, and of course, so many of our candidates coming right out of undergrad have already had some really interesting work experiences over their summer, maybe even during the semesters, through internships. We look at that very closely, though. You know, we're looking for mature, responsible, bright individuals who are ready for law school. And so again, I think it is, you know, if I were to give someone advice directly, again, it depends on the individual, but yeah, working is never a bad thing.
Great. And I do want to remind everyone, if you have any questions for our panelists, please feel free to put them in the chat. Patrice, this past law school application cycle saw the number of applications increase quite a bit, I believe, across the board. Do you have any predictions for what the next cycle will bring, or what's your best advice kind of based on last year's experience?
Gosh, I mean, I think it could definitely go either way. I think we could stay with a very high volume, or it could, decrease significantly. I think it's definitely still a little too early to tell. But I think I would advise the same thing that I would advise in any application cycle, for us at least, and I'd be curious to hear what my colleagues, what their experience was, but we had a larger surge at the beginning of the application cycle than we've had in many years. And so I think applying early is definitely really key for us, at least, because we do rolling admissions. For schools that don't do rolling admissions, it might not be as important, but I think applying earlier is, if you're applying to a school that has rolling admissions, that's going to be your best option. So our applications open September 1st. And so, applying typically before the end of the calendar year is pretty early in that cycle. We ended up filling a little bit sooner than that this year. But I think the earlier you apply is going to be better. You're going to heighten your chances of admission applying earlier in the cycle than waiting towards the end.
Marianne, what was your experience this application cycle? And any advice you have?
So yes, applications were up significantly this year. I think LSAC is reporting up 20, the apps were up 20%, and many schools, and we included, were up quite a bit more than that. So again, to echo what Patrice said, certainly get your application in as when it's ready, when it's its best presentation, but as early in the cycle as you can. I think that can be really helpful. Although after this cycle, I will say, I don't know about other law schools, but we will be looking, we may not be making decisions as quickly. We do a rolling admission, but we may not be making decisions as quickly as we have, or over the course of time. So even if you apply early, and I would say don't get concerned if you don't hear from schools. I mean, I think, I don't know about the students, if all of your students are, those who are here today are on Reddit, but a lot of law applicants are, and so are the admissions folks. And so I always would see comments, oh, I interviewed, but I haven't heard. And oh my gosh, they kept me waiting for 4 months, 3 months. This isn't necessarily only about WashU, but just across the board. And, again, so much thought goes into carefully reviewing every application, but you're also applying in the context of the applicant pool. So sometimes these decisions, again, when you are faced with so many really great, outstanding applications and applicants, and each of the schools here today, I mean, that's the situation. And so you're really trying to make these tough decisions about who to admit. And especially in a cycle like the one we're kind of coming to a close with, it's been very, very difficult, I think, on admissions folks and also on applicants. They've been surprised that sometimes they haven't gotten into a school that they thought perhaps would have been a, what they would call a safety school. So again, be very thoughtful in your applications, and I would recommend applying it, as early as you can in the cycle. Yeah.
Thanks. And Elizabeth, especially for a smaller school, how was the experience?
It was, it's always tough, and with extra applications, it's extra tough. Because they were at per usual, very strong applications. So it was very tough. I think I would echo everything that Patrice and Marianne said, and I would just note that UChicago law for a regular decision application is on rolling decision as well. The first round of regular decision application goes out in January. So it is important to know if you get your application in on September 1 when it opens, but you apply regular decision, just know off the bat, you're not going to receive a decision until the new year, because we do prioritize our early decision for December. So at least in that communication, no, but it is important to check. We're all saying apply early because we're rolling decision, but there are some schools that as long as you apply by X date, it makes literally no difference if you apply on September 1st or December 1st. So it's important to check kind of early, and then you can prioritize, okay, if this is how UChicago law works, then I know I want this in by this and this and by this. And then if this other school doesn't, matter if you get it in on March 1st, then you can prioritize differently. So look into the schools, see what their processes are, and then you can kind of prioritize by that.
Great, we do have a question. Would any of you be able to speak to how law schools might award scholarship funds and financial aid to applicants? And Marianne, we can start with you on that one.
So at Washington University, every candidate who is admitted to the law school is automatically considered for scholarship. So the law school is able to award what we call Scholar in Law awards. There are some specialized awards as well that are awarded by the law school. And then there are some outside scholarships awarded by the university. So here at WashU, and since again, I'm talking to WashU students, I'll just mention there is the Olin Fellowship for Women, and there is the Chancellor's Graduate Fellowship Program. And those decisions, again, are made by the by those particular committees with those programs. But generally, our students receive some form of scholarship from the law school. And, certainly we're looking at everything in a candidate's file, but the academic credentials is probably, where where the scholarship committee begins. They're going to look at your academic credentials. They're going to look at what you're bringing to the class. Again, we're very interested in diversity in our class, in our classes. So all of those things are taken into consideration. So the scholarships are guaranteed for the 3 years of law school. Let's see. Oh, and so in terms of financial aid, in addition to the scholarships here that are what we would call merit or /merit financial need based, there are loans. And I would say the majority of our students take out some form of loan, and we can talk about that more if you would like.
Elizabeth, can you talk a little bit about scholarship and financial aid at University of Chicago?
Yeah, sure. So every student who is admitted to UChicago Law is automatically considered for merit-based scholarships, and merit at UChicago Law, as most other schools, is very holistic. It's not numbers only driven. The scholarship committee looks at your entire application. We do interview some of our applicants. So the applicants we do interview, the scholarship committee is also looking at their interview evaluation. So it's really merit based on the entire, is your personal statement well written? Like, they're looking at all of that. We do also take need into account if you submit our UChicago need application. So if you want that to be considered as well, everyone will receive an email from the financial aid office saying, if you'd like need to be considered, fill it out by X date. If you submit it by X date, when we're reviewing your application for merit-based scholarship, we will also look at your need-based application and consider that as well. So that is an option, but it's not automatic. It's something that you need to actively submit. Our scholarships, once you get them, are for 3 years, just like WashU. So you don't have to get a certain grade point average in your first year to keep your scholarship or anything like that. And then once our deposit deadline passes, we have at least one scholarship every year that's just for the students that are in our incoming class. So there's a couple other kind of outside opportunities, but also just like UChicago Law specific, that is an opportunity for students to apply for. Some of them are just open-ended, some of them are public interest focused, where we want to see that you've had a commitment to public interest. So there are a couple opportunities for deposited students for scholarships as well.
Great. And in our last couple minutes, Patrice, anything you'd like to say about Duke's financial aid and scholarship award system?
Okay, sure. I'm sorry, there's an alarm going off in my house. I apologize for that. But I think it's pretty similar to what Elizabeth said, except for the fact that we do not automatically consider anybody for financial aid. So you do have to opt in. And our process typically starts sometime in December after the applications open September 1st, so that particular application cycle would be in December. And we do also interview as part of our scholarship selection process. The interviews are optional, but our merit assessment does take into consideration the interview if you decide to interview. And we offer you two options. You get to choose how you want to be evaluated. So you can be evaluated for financial aid for merit only, or merit and financial need. And so there is no additional application for the merit only. We use the information that's already in your application, and it is very holistic, kind of the way that Elizabeth already described. And for financial aid, of course, you'd have to submit financial type information to be considered for that. We also do have just one large scholarship pool of funding, so you're not applying to any particulars or specific named scholarships. But we will consider anyone who applies for every types of scholarship funding that we have available.
Great. And with that, I would like to thank our three panelists, Patrice Sparley, Mary Ann Clifford, and Elizabeth Carney. They are wonderful friends of Junior Jumpstart. They show up whenever I ask, so I really appreciate that. Thank you for bringing us all the latest and updated information. We really appreciate your time this afternoon. And thank you all for coming to the session. We will have another pre-law session tomorrow about personal statements. So hope to see you all then.
Thank you.
Bye.